Emmanuel trained Bob Probert, Billy Ray Cyrus, Eminem, Wesley Snipes, Ving Rhames. Emmanuel loved this shit. So when people say, "Oh, how's KRONK supporter KRONK?" I'll stop before I really curse. But number one, we're always going to
Hey,
support our
you got the
KRONK
green light.
family. So we're always going to support, when Third and Jay Leon and anybody that is cut from the KRONK cloth. But I've had an opportunity, I've been fortunate enough to see him in the gym. And let me tell you something. Third, number one, doesn't take any shit. Third will push you to break you and train you again, old school. You're going to do footwork drills today. You're going to work on your balance today. Again, he's an Emmanuel Stewart teacher. Okay, he's not just a trainer; he teaches. And let me tell you, Jake, from what I've seen, the little bit I have seen, he is the hardest worker in the gym. And I put his work ethic up there with anyone. And I've been around the greats. I put his work ethic up there with all of them. And I swear to God, if you're fans, if you guys hate me for saying this, it's the fact.
Talk about Mexican Independence Day. We can call this Teddy Atlas here in Las Vegas, Nevada. You heard from the champion himself, knocking out the competition.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Richard Ortiz of The Fighter's Voice, the only voice that matters. And with us today, we got the original member from the legendary KRONK gym. He's also a former assistant and a former business manager of the legendary, the one, the only Emmanuel Stewart. This is all original stuff, ladies and gentlemen, from the KRONK gym. Our guest, Mr. John LEPAK. Welcome to The Fighter's Voice, sir.
Thanks, Richard. It's a pleasure to finally make it. I know we've been talking about getting this one going for about a year now, so it's a pleasure to be with you.
Well, you know what? The pleasure's all ours. I can't wait to dig in and dive into those stories. But first of all, I'm going to do a recap. What did you think of last week's fight between, the unified light heavyweight champion of the world? Now we got a unified, undisputed light heavyweight champion of the world. What did you think about the two combatants and the decision?
Well, I thought it was a great fight. I thought it was very back and forth. I think you had two styles that really complemented one another in the ring. And I think that they both fought very effective fights in their own game plans. I'm not one. It was interesting. There was some posts online. We had a couple on our social media account discussing, the overusage and the misusage of the term robbery. And while a lot of people were throwing that around, I don't think it was robbery. I think it could have been even a draw. I hate to say that. I'm not one to say a fight could have been a draw, but I really think it could have been a draw. And I'm really excited to see the rematch. I think they're going to give us another great fight.
You know what? I think what makes a big difference is the scorecards. When you got the scorecards that are uneven, I think we can live with 116, 114, 112, 114. We can live with that, and we can, split decision or what have you. But when you got it so one-sided, I'm thinking, what fight did you watch? That's the scary thing, because I've watched fights before, and I thought some that there's only a certain category where you can yell robbery, and I'm going to go out and say it right now. The rematch, Sugar Ray Leonard, Tommy the Hitman Hearns. You can yell robbery with that. Felix Trinidad, Oscar De La Hoya, and I'm sure you got your list as well. But let's talk about a great fight where we get to run it back. And it happens to be the scorecards. We can't accept listening to the scorecards being so far apart. What's your take on that?
That's a great point. And I think that's where there's a common ground in this particular fight, because you can definitely make that argument. This is one of those fights where no question about it, in that one particular card, I think we all can agree that was pretty wide off at that point. But that ties into where boxing can be the most perfect sport in the ring, when it gives us that special night that just fans can talk about for decades to come. As you just mentioned, a couple classics leading into this question I'm answering. But there is the element of these are human beings, and I dare never say corruption. But you're looking at what this person saw through their own lens. But again, I do agree with you that one scorecard was way off.
Other than that, hey, it's good to say that we got one unified world champion. And I'd love to be able to say that in every division. I think we're leading up that way. But again, you have the governing bodies. You have fighters, that take the fights for business, because when it's all said and done, they need to make as much as income as possible, because boxing has a very small window. It doesn't matter if you're even 22 years old, a small window of opportunity and a small window to capitalize on those opportunities.
That's a very good point. And, I think it was one of the topics we were texting about the other day with Turki Al-Sheikh, and what he's able to do with the funding that he has behind him by bringing rival promoters together to make some of these big fights. That's his goal. And I think that, again, the trickle down effect, if you will, is helping a lot of the other guys, on the come up. You see a lot of the sanctioning bodies that are now coming together to work as well under the direction of a lot of the promotions he's putting together. So to kind of touch on that point, we were going back and forth a little bit on the other day. There's a lot of people that are benefiting, and I think we have to say that the fans are benefiting, number one, from seeing some great fights.
I agree.
And number two, like you pointed out, these guys have a very short window, and in most cases, I mean, if you look at the average life of the NFL players, I believe it's about 3.5 years, if I'm not mistaken. So a fighter comes out of boxing, and in most cases they don't have much set up in the lines of retirement funds or long-term medical care, so they have to take full advantage of that. So I always like to say this: boxing is a business before it becomes a sport in the ring that we all get to see.
I agree with you. And before we end the show, I was going to say this quote, and I was going to say this hashtag, but I'll make sure I'll say it with you on. I said I would say it with my friend on, because we were talking on the phone, and he said, "Man, that is deep." He goes, "You got to make sure you say it." And we had a few good ones, and sometimes that's when the best ideas do come out. But
Yeah,
we'll definitely touch up on that. Did you know I had a relationship with Emmanuel Stewart, where I had his cell number and he had my cell number, and I know I'm jumping from brick to brick here.
go for it.
And I remember it was Manny Pacquiao against Eric Morales, the first one. And I remember Manny Pacquiao, Eric Morales came in a little heavy, so then he had an hour to go make weight. So they were yelling, all in fun, "Hey, he had too much tortillas." And I was yelling, "No, his balls are too heavy." But I'm a Manny Pacquiao fan. So then I see Emmanuel Stewart, and he pulled out his phone. I believe it was a flip phone. He kept going over and over again, over and over and over again. He goes, "See, Ortiz, I told you I have your number." So he had it saved there, and we would just talk. We would talk boxing a lot of times. And when I interviewed him, I went old school. I went to Radio Shack, got this recording device where you can record them on the phone when I was a journalist writing for the Madera Tribune, and just the stories he would tell me, and just, he told me he would never let Tommy Hearns spar with Davey Moore. I mean, not Davey Moore, I'm sorry, Michael Moore. And I said, Moore hits hard. He goes, but Tommy has that right hand. And we would just go back and forth. And let's talk about that relationship with you and Emmanuel Stewart. I know I switched it up a little bit, but I can't hold it. I'm like a kid getting ready to open his present on Christmas.
No, it's great. I love this style. When I do, interviews, people often say I'll weave in and out of stories and often tie them together at the end. So, no, Emmanuel was somebody very dear and special to me. He's served as a mentor figure, to me, as you touched on with my experience or baptism into the business. But he was also a father figure. And not just to me, but to hundreds, thousands of other people. I tell people often, like you were telling the story about the cell phone. Emmanuel made everybody feel special. There's so many people that were like, "Oh, Emmanuel's my best friend," or "Emmanuel and I were so close," and they have all these stories. And they're all true. Emmanuel truly was a special person that just loved people. He loved seeing people happy. You're wearing one of the shirts, and a matter of fact, we got to get you a new swag package. Remind me after this.
Yes,
But
sir.
he really had a special charisma, and he cared. Emmanuel. I can't tell you how many times we would, go places, and he would send someone out to the store to go pick up ribs, and he would barbecue at people's houses, and they'd invite their friends over, and before you know it, everybody's getting a new KRONK shirt or a KRONK jacket brought over to him. And he was a very, very, not to use the word repetitively, but he just was special, and he did play a very special role in my life. like I've told the story before, outside of mentoring me in the business, every day I find myself applying a lesson that I learned from my days at the original KRONK gym, being underneath Emmanuel Stewart for the few years in the window that I was there working with him and actually lived in one of his homes. And like this morning, the way I start the day off every day, Emmanuel Stewart taught me how to shave. So, my day starts out pretty much every day with Emmanuel Stewart, believe it or not, as a part of my life.
I was hearing he would put the heat up in there, and it used to be a former fire department building.
It was a city rec center. It
Yeah,
was a
okay.
community center, and it was named after a Polish councilman named John KRONK. And when Emmanuel came over, I believe it was in 1971. Richard Sloan and I were talking about this not long ago, 1970, 71, when he started to train his brother James. And that's when the real, though, KRONK. Now, KRONK had boxing before that for years. There were a lot of other fighters, some famous, actually. I believe Jake LaMotta may have trained there when he was preparing for some of his fights in Detroit. But when Emmanuel came there, that's when it took shape into the KRONK gym. And then eventually, as we know, the KRONK boxing team developed with one of his first amateur teams, which I believe still is a record today. Was the national, with everyone on the team became the national Golden Gloves champions.
I remember when I was watching Tommy the Hitman Hearns, who was my favorite of all time boxer in the world, Tommy the Hitman Hearns. I mean, I would mimic his style. I would shadow box. I would watch him over and over again, listen to his stories. And they didn't have KRONK shirts. They didn't have eBay or any of that stuff. I went down, I found a yellow shirt, and I took it to, shout out to Pete Sports Shop in Madera. Took it to a sports shop, and I had it written down, Tommy. No, I said, the front it said, "You better pray, Sugar Ray." And in the back it said, "Tommy the Hitman Hearns." And then I had one that said KRONK. I mean, it was just red. We couldn't do the outline because you do the iron on. And I made my own. And to this day, I'm still looking for it, man, because it's just a story in itself. Because everybody wanted those golden shorts. And when another fighter wore them besides Tommy Hearns, it brought excitement to everybody. I know it did to me.
It really did, and it's something I'm looking forward to, really
Those
bringing
yellow
back
ones,
into
yes.
the pro ring, and we'll talk about that on a future podcast. We'll get some of our partners in the company and Hilmer Kenty on, and we'll give a good dive into the future. But going back to that, it's something that I was just talking to my good buddy Third Chambers about. And what that gold meant. We were just talking about it a couple hours ago about bleeding gold. And when you saw KRONK come in, this is an individual sport, as we all know. But KRONK, I think it's I don't want to sound biased, but I think it's safe to say we were the first team to come in, a real team concept. When Emmanuel rolled into a fight, you saw 50 people wearing, whether it's the jackets, the red tracksuits with the gold trim.
I remember that.
It came in like a gang, and KRONK was just, it had a certain aura, a certain confidence to it, because the talent level was so deep. So I'll give you an example. You were talking about Tommy Hearns and you mentioned Michael Moore. And I'll just go through a couple names at one time. You had Thomas Hearns, who was the 168-pound world champion, who was moving up to 175 and would soon defeat Virgil Hill. You had,
but before he fought Dennis Andres, remember he skipped 168, went from 160, and then went up. He skipped 160
to 175,
and then he came back down after fighting
68.
Dennis Andres. Correct?
Yes, that's correct. So you had Tommy Hearns at that point, though, who was 68-pound champion, who was about to move up to 75. You had Michael Moore, who was the 175-pound WBO champion. You had Dennis Andres, who was the WBC 175-pound champion. And you had Leon Zerbarber, who was about to become the WBO light heavyweight champion when Michael Moore moved up. Then you had Cody King, who was an undefeated prospect who would eventually challenge for the WBO light heavyweight championship. And I'll stop there at those names. That's all the talent in one weight division in that gym at the same time. That was how deep. And then we don't even have to go into the roster of how deep it was underneath there.
Oh, no.
You drop down in the weight classes, and let me tell you something. back to how we were talking about how the KRONK team was known and what those gold trunks stood for. You knew if you were looking across the ring as an opponent, or if you were sitting ringside as a fan or watching on TV at home, you know you were going to get some entertainment, because Emmanuel, he loved the fundamentals of boxing. He preached the fundamentals. He taught the fundamentals, but he loved the excitement. He loved the knockout, and he loved giving fans their money's worth.
Oh, he loved the knockout. He was the only trainer in the world ever to train for a knockout. He would tell me he would purposely leave Tommy's hand, the left hand low, so they can come in and taste that right hand. And it just, yeah, I mean, and here's one fighter that I wish he just came in this era when you just had some tough fighters, man. And I was rooting for him every time he had title opportunities after opportunities. But I loved Obakar coming out.
Mm.
And of course, he lost to De La Hoya, opportunity, Trinidad, and he just came in there where it was just stacked. It was just full of fire.
Oba was, I think a lot of people would consider arguably the greatest welterweight to never win a world title. And I want to say a special, send some special love out to the Carr family and the KRONK family for that matter. We lost his father, Eddie Carr, this week, and the funeral is actually Friday. So when Eddie came over from the Detroit Pal, he brought, they're just some talented people. Again, Kadi King, Oba, Tarek Salmasi, Damian Fuller, a handful of other guys as well. I'm sorry if I forgot the names, but he merged. Manuel was a great talent scout, and he knew where talent was, and that was another thing. He was able to attract a lot of outside talent and merge them with the KRONK gym. In the case of Oba turned pro when he was still a senior in high school at Detroit Cooley High. And Oba was a phenom. He was truly a young superstar. He had, I believe, the first fighter to ever sign a direct USA contract with USA Tuesday Night Fights. Brad Jacobs could verify that. But Obakar, while he's a senior in high school, is fighting on USA Tuesday Night Fights, as were a few other guys. And then it was crazy because he was so popular that they actually had, and this is dating the era, but they had a 1-900 number where fans could dial in. Oba was this hot, and you dialed the 1-900 number and you picked Oba's next opponent. There were 3 names, and Livingstone Bramble was the name that actually was chosen.
Livingstone Bramble, that's another name, and that's another tough opponent. And just, yeah, I mean, you mentioned Obakar. I had the opportunity of seeing him, Obakar, when he came to Fresno, and also when he came and stopped by Lemoore a couple of times towards the end of his career. And I talked his head off, of course, and just a nice guy. One thing, not just Obakar, but it wasn't me. There was another media person. Just they came at him with all kinds of questions, and he had just made weight. I mean, he wants to eat now. So no, actually, it was before the weigh-in, and I was thinking, I already knew. Okay, you're gonna get what you're gonna get when you want to try to talk to a fighter before a weigh-in. Because back in the day, there was no easy way to cut weight. I mean, you're grumpy, you're angry, you got your mindset on, and yeah, I mean, that media person, he learned. But Oba was cool. He talked to him the very next day and said, "Hey, man, I just, I'm focused on my weight and focused on this fight." So, just a nice guy. And these guys, they're monsters inside of the ring, and outside of the ring, they're gentlemen. They're just the nicest people you'll ever meet.
It's a great point, and I think that speaks to a lot of the misconceptions that fans feed into today. What I find interesting about the day and age we live in with social media, people get into these arguments like they're on the payroll. It's like they're fighting for this guy like they're their son, and they're going at it, and look, I love to see fan engagement. I think that's a wonderful thing, and we have some very passionate fans, I think it's safe to say, in the sport of boxing. But you go back to the fighters. This is how we eat, and I'll share with you a story that Mike Tyson told me once. He said, "John," when Henry Armstrong was at the end of his career and Sugar Ray Robinson was the superstar of boxing, he wanted to fight Sugar Ray. And Sugar Ray said, "I can't do it, champ. Like, you're my idol. Because I'll beat you now. You're old. Like, I don't want to do this to you." He said, if I am your idol, that's why you'll fight me, because I need this payday, champ. So as Mike and I were talking through this conversation, that's how we eat. Like I can't tell you, I like for example when Botha fought Mike, not to get off the Kronk topics, but our whole camps were
Francois, yeah,
friends.
the White
You
Buffalo.
know, that's right. Look, we're in camp. I'm with Mario Costa, who has Mike's pigeons on his roof at the bar in Jersey City. Panama Lewis, Jimmy Glenn,
Panama
Sterling,
Lewis, man,
and,
I
and
met
we're
Panama Lewis
all
too.
and
He's a
we're all
character.
friends with Stacy and Crocodile. And these guys they're puffing their chests out. They want to kill each other. Mike tries to break his arm in the ring, but afterwards, guess what? We all got paid together, and everyone walked away friends.
I remember when I was there when Franz both met Don King for the very first time. He had an advisor with him. It was at the MGM Grand, and when they met, they kind of said, "Okay, I guess that was it." I guess I mean, it was fight week, and they happened to meet Don King during fight week. So Don is just paying attention to what he needs to pay attention to. But he already knew in his mind, okay, I'm going to give you the attention needed when the attention is needed. Right now, it's
Mhm.
fight week. So it was a brief introduction, but I remember they said that. And I met him before when he first came down, and he said, "Yeah, we're about to meet Don King right now." And it was brief. And I remember Oliver McCall was walking around, and I introduced him to my mom, and I said, "Mom, you're looking at the next heavyweight champion of the world." And he goes, "That's right." And he started flexing, and there's plenty of stories, and I want to hear your stories because I'm going at it right now because you're talking about some of the fighters that I grew up watching when I was a youngster, and I know you have stories that occurred and that you are a part of. Tell us one story that just it has to hit you every now and then. That's just it really meant something to you, and to this day you still grab something from it and you apply it in what you're doing.
That's a great question. I would say probably there are way too many answers I could give you, and I'll probably wake up in the middle of the night now and I'll think of something, be like, "Damn, I should have mentioned that one." But being at Kronk over the years, I'll tell you, like people see the big time and the hotel suites and the Rolls Royces, and look, it's great when you get to that level. But in order to get there, you have to go through a lot. And I think anyone out there in the business that started out and it came up with a young fighter along the way. A good friend of mine, Michael Clark, was a undefeated lightweight. He was a national Golden Gloves champion. He signed with Emmanuel. And I remember we would go on the road for some of these like 4 and 6 round fights. And there was one occasion, there were so many of us that his brother actually slept in the bathtub of the hotel room, and you're trying to get those extra buffet vouchers, and meal vouchers.
Absolutely.
And, it's just fun times like that. It was Emmanuel barbecuing at the house. And I remember this was always a good one for me. He was barbecuing ribs. He was making homemade coleslaw this afternoon, and he said, "Big John, why don't you go to the store and get us a 6-pack of Miller Genuine Draft?" I looked at him. I said, "Chief, I'm 19. I can't even buy beer." He's like, "Oh my God, I forgot how young you were, man." So at 19 years old, I was already working for Emmanuel Stewart with a lot of different responsibilities, and with it came a great deal of pressure at times. But I wouldn't trade those times for the world. There was a matter of fact, I'll give you a really good one. So during that time frame, Emmanuel was training a very dear friend of mine, Jeff Fennick. I just talked to Jeff actually a couple of weeks ago. And so Jeff and
Trainer.
I met during his time with Emmanuel Stewart, but then later we would work together when he was with Mike, and just been friends ever since. So we're in Vegas, and Emmanuel and I are staying at the La Quinta Suites across from the Top Rank offices. And there was a Ruth Chris Steakhouse, and then there was like a local casino over on the other side. And this is when times were lean. Okay, Emmanuel, like the oil well stopped pumping oil, and we were riding on fumes for a minute. It's no secret. So Emmanuel said, "Come on, we're gonna go win a few dollars." I was like, "All right." So we go next door to this casino. It didn't even have a hotel. I wish I remember the name of it. And he had this little strategy of how he would play blackjack. And he said, "These are the places that you come and you win." So we would go every night to this casino. He had his little strategy where he'd go and win a couple $100. We'd walk back across the La Quinta Suites to Ruth Chris Steakhouse and go have us a steak dinner every night. And that's how we literally lived in that entire training camp. Is we'd go win a couple $100, go to Ruth Chris, and then we would sit down and, Emmanuel being Emmanuel, who he was, before the end of the night, people are buying you drinks and, he's sitting there telling war stories. So I got to really hear a lot of the classic stories when there was that period of time where it was just me and maybe a couple other people around Emmanuel, but the entourages were gone. The money was gone. The big money was gone at that time. But that's where I was able to soak up so much knowledge and so many of the great stories that Emmanuel shared.
Those are great stories. I could tell you one right off the bat. It was my buddy, Big Bill and Anthony Cree. We drove down to Vegas. We slept in the outside car lot of right across. You can hear this boat go off all the time, over and over again, with our feet literally outside the car. And in the morning, we went to Caesar's Palace and jumped in the pool. So we're still smelling like chlorine, but we had to see because Tommy Hearns was, I believe, on the undercard of Riddick Bowe and Evander Holyfield, and he was working out in where all the big fights took place at Caesar's Palace when they were outside, and he had to walk across where they had the tennis courts and etc. I couldn't even tell you where it's at now once you go to Caesar's Palace if I had to. But we did that just to be a part of it and watch. I got to see Tommy for the very first time hit a punching bag and spar and see that patented right hand land. Because sparring is supposed to kind of hold back. Tommy was letting loose because this guy was trying to put on a show too. But Tommy started letting loose, and it was just awesome. It was amazing. And just to grab that, there was no camcorders, there was no video cameras, but it's all in here and in here.
Yeah, you know what? That's great. It's funny. I was just speaking to somebody about that a couple weeks ago. That was probably one of my favorite venues, and it was always my favorite casino to stay at. Excuse me. And I remember what you're talking about because you would walk by the tennis courts, and then there were the villas on the side, the private villas, and then it would be in the ring they would set up in the parking lot in the back, and then the pavilion, which was another great venue at Caesars, that tin roof pavilion. It was over off to the other side. And I worked with Emmanuel then. You're right. Tommy was in camp. I actually have some pictures with him and Evander from that training camp. There were two fights that Emmanuel trained Holyfield. It was for the Alex Stewart rematch, if I'm not mistaken. I believe it was the second fight. And then following that was the Riddick Bowe Fan Man fight as well. And I think we still actually have Emmanuel's corner jacket. Emmanuel's daughter does from the Alex Stewart fight.
Nice. That's some good things, some good stuff. And to be able to talk to Tommy Hearns and tell him about every time he was on Arsenio Hall or different quotes he said, and just funny things that he said. Very honest, and the conversations he had with Sugar Ray Leonard, and I mean that stuff. It doesn't happen today. I mean, there'll be some great sound bites today, some great interviews today, but they'll never, ever be like they were in the early 90s, late 80s, especially with Tommy the Hitman Hearns. And whenever, I see Max or I see some of these old school commentators, Jim Lampley, I will say, what does Tommy Hearns do against Bud Crawford? And it's always Tommy's too big. Tommy puts everybody in a close fight. Everybody in today's, even 175s, even the welterweights, Tommy beats everybody. You cannot count Tommy out because of that executioner that he has, that right hand. Tommy didn't get enough credit for his left hook to the body or his left hook because everybody saw the right hand. But Tommy's jab was unstoppable. His left hook to the body, amazing. And Tommy didn't get credit for his whole left side of his body, his hook, because everybody was looking for that right hand. Tommy was the full package, and he knew how to protect his weaknesses if he had any. People used to talk about, his chin or what have you. Tommy would take a good shot too. So it wasn't that, everybody in boxing gets hit. But Tommy, when he would hit you, it was just a little different. And I'm sure he was something special to watch inside the gym.
Let me tell you, you touched on some very underrated things that people often look past when you're talking about Tommy. Of course, he had arguably one of the greatest right hands in the history of boxing. I mean, if he caught you with that, you were going to sleep, or at least you were on your way.
Yes.
Is Hagler was one of the few who somehow took it that night.
Yes.
But if you look at Tommy, like, and for example, the fight right after the Hagler fight, the James Schuler fight, you
Yeah.
saw how Tommy was just brutalizing him with that left hook to the body. And I remember his trainer, Walter Smith, would always teach it in the gym. The old school way is palm up when you're going to the body and palm down when you're going to the chin. And I understand there's different variations of throwing it to the chin, but even Tommy, in a kind of side story, he taught me how to throw a left hook in the gym, and he taught me just right here, just short and palm down, and just come right down on the side of the chin. And Tommy had an amazing jab. He had amazing footwork. He had the ability not just to box, but to maximize his leverage while he was boxing and be able to sit down on his shots. And that is when people often talk about what's the KRONK style. Of course, people look at the knockout, but it all starts with your foundation, your footwork, your balance, your ability to transition and leverage your punches. And that's where, like, I saw Emmanuel wasn't just with Jeff Fennick, but with Lennox, with Graziano Raccagiani. Just I could go down the list. Chavez, so many fighters when I was in camp with Emmanuel.
Oh, yeah.
He never tried to change their style. He just tried to take them back to the basics, and they had gotten so far down the road that sometimes you get away from what got you there. So we would always bring them back to the foundation. And that's one thing about Tommy. He never got away from the foundation of boxing, meaning those basic skill sets that really were the foundation and the building blocks of what the KRONK style came from.
I agree. I'm glad he finally fought Virgil Hill. I was pulling for that fight. It happened a little later than sooner. But Tommy, and you got Emmanuel Stewart. Who didn't he train? Nassim Hamed, Oscar De La Hoya. I think these guys just wanted to say, "Hey, I want to be trained by the living legend before it's all said and done." And he made an impact on everybody. Can you imagine being a fighter and you're looking across, the gold is rocking, and then you see Emmanuel Stewart? I think they think about their opponent probably third. It's just like the Yankees when the other team gets caught looking at the pinstripes. Well, they're looking at the gold and they're looking at Stewart, then their opponent. Before then, they're looking at the lights afterwards.
There's a lot of truth in what you said, and I've heard that analogy used before about the KRONK Gold and getting caught up in, like you said, the Yankee pinstripes, and with Emmanuel Stewart in the corner. I mean, I can't tell you how many fights I went to over the years with Emmanuel where, of course, at the big time, you're friends because you've known each other for so long. You've come up in the amateurs and you've had these rivalries, but you have the camaraderie. It's just business. But there, on the other hand, where you're fighting guys on the undercards and you're coming up, and the kid's trainer and the fighter and the family, they're coming over and wanting to take a picture with Emmanuel Stewart and get his autograph. You're like, I'm standing here with, like, say it was Michael Clark or Cotty or whoever it may have been. I'm like, we're getting ready to fight these guys, and they're coming over asking our trainer for his autograph and to take pictures with him. So to your point, I've never heard anybody bring that up before, but I think you hit that spot on.
Yeah, Emmanuel he was a nice guy, wonderful guy. I mean, what he contributed to Julio Cesar Chavez, for the rematch with Frankie Randall, and I remember Emmanuel. He told me, he said Julio's a very beautiful person. So I brought my mom all the way from Fresno, California to Las Vegas just so she can have a glimpse and take a picture with Julio Cesar Chavez. At that time, they were staying, I believe, at the Hilton, and he said they're gonna be coming through those doors right now. He said we're gonna go eat lunch, and then he was telling me the story about he's just a beautiful person and something to do with some oranges or something, that he was giving oranges out or doing something. And as you know, Julio stops by, he's able to take a picture with my mom, my sister, and just Emmanuel made that happen.
That was at the Hilton. We stayed at the Las Vegas Hilton for the Frankie Randall rematch. And a funny story is we weren't allowed to stay at the MGM. So we were actually
Frankie Randall was there at the MGM with his wife and with Carl King and who's the other guy?
Aaron Snowell.
Yeah, that was in Mike's corner.
Aaron Snowell.
Yes, there you go.
So, but we were banned because what happened was after the first fight, the people were so upset that Julio lost. Um, let's just say there were a lot of hotel rooms destroyed,
I heard about that.
and what at least what was told to me was, and this is when I think Julio was just a little boy. I think the story was, and forgive me, Julio is again a dear friend of mine. Him and
Yeah.
his agent, we still do a lot of work together. I love Julio. Very, very special to me in my life personally, just outside of the sport of boxing. But I was told that one of the sons tried lighting the curtains on fire in the hotel room and they broke the TV. And
Oh man.
then it was like, nope. So then we had to stay at the Hilton. And then for the Meldrick Taylor rematch, we stayed at, it was something Park Resorts. Something Park Resorts where they had like this big complex with pools in the middle of it, and you could access the rooms. They were like kind of mini condos. And then the third fight that Emmanuel trained him, we stayed in Mexico. That was actually Oliver McCall joined us in that camp for the tail end because he was preparing for the Lennox Lewis fight. And the third fight we had,
Yes, that's
with
right.
Julio,
We
Tony
shocked the
Lopez.
world on that one.
Sure did. And you know what? I'll tell you a good story about that one. So when Emmanuel was training Oliver McCall, this was when Emmanuel first started to take on a lot of assignments. Like we were talking, about this on a documentary prep call the other day. And people referred to Emmanuel as the hired gun at that time. And he didn't like that. He really didn't like that term used at all because he was most happy here in the basement at KRONK. But he did what he had to do.
Yeah.
So when Oliver McCall came to Detroit to train, when we kicked off camp, he knew Oliver. You had to control Oliver, to a degree, because Oliver, if he goes, he's gone. He's not coming home. So Emmanuel had him a custom tuxedo made, and he would take him to his club. Emmanuel had a beautiful restaurant club downtown on the riverfront on Jefferson Avenue in Detroit. And he would let Oliver McCall kind of work as a greeter and a host, and then he would sing at night when someone played the piano. He couldn't carry a tune to save his life, but Emmanuel cured his itch for the nightlife and his need to get out and be around people. And he didn't drink,
Genius.
didn't party, but Emmanuel knew how to handle that. And that was to another point of the genius of Emmanuel Stewart. He knew when to hit the brakes and he knew when to press the gas, and he knew how to work with each fighter. He got to know the fighter personally, not just professionally inside the ring for their skill sets.
He knew how to bring out the best in everybody, and he wasn't going to change them overnight, but he was going to use their strengths, and them just mentally having Emmanuel Stewart in their corner already 25% better. Just the confidence that they have, that they're learning from the legendary Emmanuel Stewart. And you talk to any trainer. I talked to Robert Garcia, future Hall of Famer. And I said, hey, if you can come back in a dream fight, who would be your trainer? And at first he said Emmanuel Stewart, but then he goes, oh, then I would have my son and so forth. But he already knew who one of the best trainers in the world was. So coming from an elite trainer to mention Emmanuel Stewart tells you how valuable and how legendary he is to the sport of boxing. And still today, a lot of people have his traits. And you mentioned the last name Stewart, and a lot of people are going to listen and pay attention.
And I think it shows today. I mean, you could trace the lineage from McCall. Actually, before that, you could go one more, move to heavyweight, Holyfield, McCall, and you could go to Lennox Lewis at that point, transitioning into Klitschko. Yeah. And then if you carry on and you talk about people who, carry, and there's only a handful, I like to say, that really carry that Emmanuel Stewart style of teaching. And then you could go into, Javen with having Tyson Fury. You could go into how Jonathan Banks took over for Klitschko. You could go into how Andy Lee has Joseph Parker. You had Third Chambers, who was bringing David Adelaide along quite well. And now Third's training Jake Paul for Mike Tyson.
And another pupil under Emmanuel Stewart, and is now an elite trainer. Point.
Very, very good one, too, to add to the list. Mark, very dear friend of mine for years. And has some good stories with Mark, too. We used to have some good times. But he left his mark, I think, on a handful of people that are really cut from that style that can teach the way Emmanuel taught. A lot of people can imitate, but there are a handful out there who really get it, who know how to teach it.
Yeah, Emmanuel was that person and a great commentator. I mean, when he was talking, you wanted to listen to his knowledge. Very fan friendly, and just they broke the mold with him, and he
Yeah.
continues to live on. When you think of those Kronk gyms, those shorts, and just Kronk, Emmanuel Stewart, Tommy Hearns, all
Mm.
those legends come to mind.
Yeah,
We
great
saw
memories.
Tommy Hearns, I want to say about a year and a half ago, and I recognized him coming out of the elevator. We talked a little bit, and I was able to mimic some of the things that he said, and took pictures. I did a small interview with him, small soundbite, and I told my girl, I said, "Look, he's not going to be able to make it out the door." I go, "Trust me, he won't even be able to make it out the door." And some lady had asked me, she goes, "Who was that?" And I go, "Are you kidding me right now?" And then I told her who he was, and I'm over there. I'm having a cold one. I'm relaxing. I'm watching people watching. No exaggeration. It was an hour and a half later. He is barely where the ring's at, in the middle by the lion.
Yeah,
And they
yeah.
just he was taking baby steps. He just whatever plans, if he had dinner plans, whatever, they were canceled. They were done. He couldn't even make it out the door an hour and a half later. True story. You would have to be there, but I'm preaching to the choir here. You already know.
It's funny you say that, Tommy, and I've had quite a few of those experiences with him in Vegas. And going back, excuse me, when I was young, he was probably the first person that I was ever around where, Tommy, that's my guy. I'm a kid, carrying a suitcase on a trip, literally. But, I'm hanging out with Tommy. I'm a kid, in the entourage. Guys I'm still friends with this to this day. Ramsey, Kenny, Jerry Reese. Matter of fact, we just had dinner with Tommy and Jerry Reese and Hilmer about a couple weeks ago. But Tommy was the first person I ever looked and I said, wow, this guy's really a star, a celebrity. And we were in Vegas, and the same thing you just talked about. We, for some reason, went downtown, um, down in the old Vegas area, and he could not make it to the end of the block. Everybody stopped him. And what I always found with Tommy over the years, virtually there was no place we could go without him getting stopped and people knowing him. Same with Emmanuel. Emmanuel was definitely a star. He was a celebrity. But with Tommy, he would take his time, take pictures, stop, not so much autographs all the time, because you just start getting mobbed, but talk to people, shake their hands. He'd always give them a little knockout punch,
Yeah.
and smile and joke with the camera. And Tommy was a prankster. He was a jokester. He still is. He's known for his little one-liners and, busting your chops at the dinner table. He's a great guy.
Yeah, yeah, like I said, I remember every interview. Read. I used to go buy those Ring magazines just to try to find out, okay, when's he fight next? What he said, uh, what he used to wear, and dancing on the Arsenio Hall show, and
Oh
coming
yeah.
on Martin, and you named it. I mean, I was there, and I was glued to the TV. I was watching all his quotes, and even after the Hagler fight, still this day, my favorite all time fighter of all time.
He's a great guy. I'm actually working with his business associate Jerry, who also grew up with us in the Kronk gym. So we're working on a new merch collab with Tommy, and just in the early stages of talking it through. But hopefully, we'll have some new Kronk Tommy Hearns merch coming out pretty soon. And I love, to this day, I love being around Tommy because and sometimes we'll just sit there and reminisce, and you just get lost in time.
Yeah, I bet you do. I remember he made those runs. He had two back-to-back fights at cruiserweight, on some Don King
Hmm.
cards, and I believe his brother Billy was with him at the time. Billy Hearns.
So Billy, for the Virgil Hill fight, he left Emmanuel because this is when Michael Moore started to really come on and get that attention. So as I spoke about how they were all in the gym at the same time, it wasn't long after that
And Michael
that
Moore skipped cruiserweight, went from light heavyweight straight to
straight to the
heavyweight.
money. Yep, straight to the money, and he could carry it. But to Tommy, so Tommy left and went with a gentleman by the name of Alex Shear, and that was when oh God, what was our guy that went to prison for the bank embezzlement, the Wells Fargo, Ross Fields, what was his name? Harold Weston.
A
Was it because
trainer?
there's a no, not the trainer Harold Weston. There's oh man, the guy that got busted for he licensed Muhammad Ali Professional Sports. He embezzled millions of dollars from Wells Fargo. So, anyways, he got out of prison and came back to the business. And so Tommy was with him for I think 2 fights when he left KRONK, beat Virgil Hill, then he came back. But back to where you were at with the cruiserweight fights, Billy was always in Tommy's corner. And if you couldn't see him, you could hear him whistling because
Yeah,
Billy
I
was
was about to
always
say that. You heard him
right there,
whistling.
always whistling. So when Tommy fought those cruiserweight fights, that was when Emmanuel was training Chavez and Oliver McCall for Don. And he moved up to cruiserweight. He beat Andrew Maynard
Yeah,
and Freddie Delgado,
decisively.
if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
I
He
was
was
at
looking
those
good.
fights.
He was
He
looking good those
was.
2 fights.
You know what? In the Andrew Maynard fight, if I'm not mistaken, I think he did get him with the left hook to the body and the right hand to the chin. I think he set it up with that combination, if I'm not mistaken.
I just remember you can see exactly why they used to call him the Motor City Cobra, because his wingspan from his back. Tommy had a heavyweight back. Which is where he generated his shoulders. I mean, you talk about the swimmer. What's the guy from the Olympics over and over again? Then he got caught smoking weed.
Michael
Phelps.
Phelps. Yeah.
His wingspan, Tommy's wingspan was incredible. You got to remember, 6'1", still making 147 pounds. I mean, pure strength and just being a professional and making weight when he needed to make weight. And then moving up to 154, taking on Wilfred Benitez, and without which was a very good fight, tactical fight. And
masterful.
The list goes on.
Listen, Tommy at 154, I will say this. You know, I think he places, you know, in the top 10, if not very close to the top 10, literally going through the weight classes through history. But I think at 154, I think Tommy Hearns reigns number one all time. And I say that even in the modern day, I love Terrence Crawford. I've watched his career. He's one of the few fighters I've really watched of the modern day from when they turned pro. And I just think at 154, I don't think anybody beats Tommy.
I agree with you. I mean, honestly, I agree with you. I mean, okay, let me ask you this. Who beats him at 154? Let's ask that. I mean, they can share the ring with him, but they're still they're still possibly going to get hit harder than they've ever been hit before. And if they're looking for the right hand, they're going to see a jab all night or that hook to the body. You got to remember, before Iran Barkley landed that big right hand, Tommy was eating them up to the body.
Oh yeah. He was, you know, and again, I look at Barkley. I mean, this guy was one rugged customer.
Yeah,
and you know, it's just
still is.
He's definitely the kind of guy, at least if you're walking down a dark alley, you want him on your side, not going against you. But, you know, Barkley, it's interesting because I do agree with you on the first fight. And then interestingly enough, when that was actually before Tommy came back to KRONK, he lost the light heavyweight title to Barkley in the rematch.
Yeah, he did. It was Caesar's Palace.
Yep, and that's when Tommy came back to Emmanuel.
Tommy fought with a broken nose, but Tommy in the second round went back to the ropes where he needed to be off the ropes. But
I mean, that was a tough one to watch. I remember being a kid watching that one. But you know, to Barkley's credit, you know, he was just one of those rugged guys. You know, we talk about the four kings, but you know, you have Benitez who was in that mix. You had Iran Barkley who was right there on the doorstep in that mix for a lot of those years and versus a lot of
Michael
those guys.
Moore. I mean, remember before he got beat by Duran?
Oh man, when Duran and Barkley, that to this day, that's one of my favorite fights.
Oh yeah, it doesn't get old. I love watching Barrera and Asim Hamed over and over again as well. And I never get mad. I never get old of the rematch, Tommy Hearns and Sugar Ray Leonard.
You know, that's a classic. People sleep on that fight, and they often focus on the result and the controversy. Now, that was a controversial decision. If you want to talk about a robbery today, to all the fans out there, that was a robbery. But you know what? Tommy accepted that with so much class in the ring. You know,
he was at peace with it because he knew, and he took over the whole press conference afterwards.
Yeah, you know, Tommy was really a consummate professional, just a complete gentleman, you know, sharp dresser, I mean, Tommy, I used to always joke, like he'd walk by because again, he's a jokester, and I remember I'd be like, "Ow," he'd be like, "Huh? What'd you?" I said, "Man, you dressed so sharp, you cut me." We would laugh like, just Tommy is just he really he gave it all to the fans, and I think today
He
it's
did.
it's
He
it's
did.
something that we look at like last weekend's fight. The fans got their money's worth. Both guys brought their game on that night, and that was great. I think for us again to kind of tie back into that whole division, with the Tommy Hearn stories. He made sure the fans got their money's worth every time he got in that ring.
He did. He did exactly. And I know you got some new news to come out with. I know you want to talk about the documentary. You got some new gear, and like you said, we can save that for another podcast. But
Yeah.
what can we expect on a breakout year for 2025 coming from KRONK?
Well, like you said, I want to bring the team on a podcast again and really get down into the blueprint. But I'll say this, we're being around Emmanuel in the KRONK organization for so many years. Like I said, just starting out as a little kid running errands, working my way up to being on the promotional team for some of the biggest fights in pay-per-view history at that time. I learned every facet of the business, and I that's one of the things that I think, looking back through my experiences, I'm glad that I learned it that way. Now, I started at the top with the best of the best, but I know what it's like to go pick someone up from the airport or grab a box of T-shirts or carry a gym bag to the arena the night of the fight. So again, going through all of those years and experiences, I say that because to tie into the answer, I saw what was there, the blueprint that gave the success, but I also saw some of the areas where there were some shortcomings and some of the mistakes were made. And for me right now, it's great because there's no rush. I mean, obviously, trust me, I would love to get out there and start running right now. But we're setting the foundation up, and we've got a really good team. Everybody complements one another. Everybody has their own lanes that they work in, and I'll just say that I know what's needed again to make sure that we avoid some of those pitfalls. So when I was looking at who we were going to bring into the team, I wanted to make sure we had those positions covered. Because again, if you just compare it to football, for example, you got to have a good tackle. You got to have a good end. It's not just about the star quarterback and the stud running back and the star receiver with burners. You got to have those role players there that are
Exactly.
there day in and day out.
Exactly. And you know what? Ever you need a podcaster, you're looking right at him. And I will say
My
this
man.
one thing I do want to bring up. Oliver will call Lennox Lewis for the rematch. Now Emmanuel's in Lennox Lewis's corner. Tommy the Hitman Hearns and Dennis Andres. Afterwards, Emmanuel Stewart's training Dennis Andres. I mean, that speaks for itself right then and there. Right then and there. I mean, what type of trainer he is, and you can't beat him, join him, so to speak.
Those actually were Dennis Andre's words before he fought Jeff Harding. And it's interesting you bring up those two fights. They were immediately following the fights when they got beat. It was right after, because Emmanuel always as a matter of fact, I have a call with Lennox tomorrow. You just reminded me. He sent me an email and confirmed. So that there's a little hint there about some things we're working on too. But
Nice. Hey,
when
well, we got to hit
Emmanuel,
some of those guests on the show.
you know what? We're going to talk about that. I told you. I'm glad we got this out of the way.
Yes, of
Long
course.
overdue. But to your point, though, when Tommy, and what a devastating performance against Dennis Andres. I mean, he just destroyed Dennis.
And he
And
put that
then
weight on so well. And he kept saying
moved up, like
novice.
you said.
Knowledge, yeah.
You and remember, like the picture afterwards of Tommy's back with his
Yeah.
back muscles, looked like a bodybuilder.
Yep.
And then when Tommy beat Andres, he came to train at
ABC.
KRONK, and he said, if you can't beat him, join him. He said that on the I think it was NBC pre-fight versus Jeff Harding.
Yeah, and he made the right decision and became world
Yep.
champion again. And just
Yeah.
was able to just to expand his career. I mean, push it. I mean, I think of Miguel Cotto. When he went back to when he went with Freddie Roach reinvented Miguel Cotto and had another run. A lot of fighters don't get another run, if not opportunity.
Yeah.
Miguel Cotto was able to reinvent himself, and the great Freddie Roach was able to bring it out of him. Another great trainer.
Oh, Freddie's a boxing genius. He's cut from that Eddie Futch cloth,
Yeah.
old school, and when I think that's where, thank God on one hand for the internet and for YouTube, where you can study, but I think we're missing. I mean, it'd be easy for me to jump ahead and say we're missing a lot of the real old school teachers. There's not a lot of trainers being mentored anymore. It's almost like the microwave generation. You want to put it in the microwave, hit 60 seconds, and then you're waiting and you open the door when there's still 5 seconds
Now
left
you're
because you don't
preaching.
want to wait
That's right.
anymore. And you can't do that. Boxing, you have to slow cook it. You have to master the fundamentals. And so
Got to
when
have
you
that
look at
chemistry
him,
too.
you have to. And see, and again, when you look at Emmanuel's success, when you look at Tommy Hearns, there was always another gentleman in the corner. That was Walter Smith. Walter grew up with Joe Louis. Now, when you looked in the KRONK gym, you had Luther Burgess, who was with Eddie Futch back in the day. You had Sammy Poe. You had Dave Shoulders. You had and not everyone was a full-time KRONK trainer. Some of them left, but you had Mr. Miller, who went on to train James Toney. He left KRONK, who trained Lindell Holmes as well. Emmanuel had a great supporting staff of old school trainers. And again, everybody knew their position, they knew their lane. And that, again, is where the team concept of KRONK really came into play. And I think contributed a great deal to the success and the family atmosphere, almost, if you will, of that gym.
There's a coworker of mine. His name happens to be like the comedian Eddie Murphy. He lives in
Okay.
Detroit. He said he went to the gym when he was first there. He said he didn't stay too long. Boxing wasn't for him, but he remembers watching Emmanuel Stewart there in Tommy Hearns when Tommy Hearns was first coming up. And and I was just asking him all these stories because he's from Detroit. So I just had to throw that name out there because you never know if you would have said, "Oh yeah, I remember this kid named Eddie Murphy," but this is before
Eddie
the
Murphy.
comedian.
I don't remember Eddie Murphy from Detroit, but there was, to your point, there were just so many people that you'll meet, and especially if you're walking through the airport, you're wearing a KRONK shirt. I don't care where you are, literally in the world, somebody's going to give you a second look or stop you and ask you a question or share a story with you. And that was, again, one of the things that I think is so interesting about the brand is that the stories live on. You have a handful of people who have carried that legacy forward into their own careers, that are achieving their own independent success since KRONK had a short period of kind of just being stagnant for a minute, if you will. But that's one of the things we'll talk about when I come back is, I'm really working to, as I say, reunite the family the best I can, bring a lot of the old school guys back from some of the original foundation, the original champs, but up until the last generation of guys that were around the gym, people like, the Anthony Barnes and the people that were in that class that really were, I think, on the verge of doing some special things, in their own careers, respectively. So that's my goal, is to bring back, KRONK to its roots, and starting by bringing in real KRONK people who would understand the culture. Because, it's like when Emmanuel would get into camp, and you brought up Prince Nassim Hamed, and, Naz and Emmanuel, I think, had a great chemistry, because he let Naz be Naz, but he worked on certain things with him, and they had a good run together. But I thought it was, I could see the frustration sometimes on Emmanuel's face when Naz had the other trainer, and that was the guy who wouldn't stay in his lane as the assistant.
Oh, okay.
They're fighting for control to be the number one guy. And that was the one thing about Emmanuel, he wasn't taking a backseat to anybody.
No, I not even to his fighter. I remember on early in USA fights, I'm not sure what fighter it was, but Emmanuel was pleading with him, "Let your hands go." And he said, "You know what? I'm going to go sit in the stands and have a glass of wine." He
Yeah,
said that on the air, and I remember that because I would always bring that up to him. He goes, "Because you're not doing what you're supposed to do. You're not listening." He goes, "If you want
that's
to
a true
just stay here and
story.
do your own thing, I'm gonna go have me a glass of wine." Emmanuel
That's a
Stewart
true
said that on
story.
USA. I mean,
That's a
Sean
true
O'Grady
story.
commented on that.
That, yeah, I remember that, and that's where I cut my teeth in the promotional business. I started out there the same thing. I used to walk the B-side guys to the ring, or make an airport run for promoter Bill Kazurski, and that's where I really
That's
again
all good stuff
learned the
right there.
promotional business. And another USA story too was when Michael Moore, I believe it was Jim McDonald, if I'm not mistaken, and he just was lackluster. The crowd, and that was a tough crowd. That was a Budweiser, beer drinking, fist fight in the crowd, type of atmosphere. And Michael was getting lackadaisical. And I remember Emmanuel said, if I may curse on the show, he said, "You think people come out here to pay to see you box? They pay to see you knock a motherfucker out. Now get out there and knock this motherfucker out." And there's a clip of that on that fight. And then Michael Moore went out and stopped him that round.
I remember I said one time I was talking to Emmanuel, and I said Michael Moore's kind of just like kind of laid back, kind of relaxed a little bit. He goes, "That's an understatement." He said, "I need to push this guy." He goes, "I need to stay on him." That's what he told me one time. And yeah, Michael Moore's Michael Moore, and but Emmanuel was able to bring it come fight night. And
Yeah,
one of
I
the
think
greatest heavyweight fights, knockouts, I mean, knockdown, no holds bar was I'm forgetting his opponent right now, and I don't want to forget it right now. He said no more ESPN fights. Burt Cooper and Michael Moore was oh my
barn
gosh.
burner.
If you've never seen this fight before, I'm telling everybody on the air, you Google it, you go to YouTube, Michael Moore and Burt Cooper. Slugfest.
That was like Ron Lyle and George Foreman
I
at
agree.
the Caesars Pavilion. That right there, I think should be on everyone's top 10 heavyweight watch list. That
I
that
agree.
was a rumble.
I agree. And able to get up and just perform. And man, I mean, we could talk all day about this stuff.
Yeah,
Before we go, we got to talk about this. I think he's doing everything necessary to prepare himself. Um, you know, and let's talk about Jake Paul. I mean, he has professionals around him. At the end of the day, you still got to compete, but they're asking him about a real fighter. Well, who do you want him to fight? I mean, who do you want him to really exchange fights with? He did take a real fight. Okay, yes, he lost to Tyson Fury's brother, but he didn't get knocked out. He wasn't dominated, and a lot of people argue and think that Jake Paul won that fight. So I don't know why people want to see him go to sleep. Now, him taking on Mike Tyson, I mean, it is what it is.
hmm See, I look at it this way, and again, one of my closest friends, my KRONK brother. Again, I just was talking to him a couple hours ago. Third Chambers, head trainer, and another KRONK family member of ours, Jay Leon Love. Even though he went on to the money team, he's been with Jake since he turned pro. You're talking about a kid that turned pro with one amateur fight in his
Yeah.
20s. And if you look at his background, what he was doing, it really had no ties. Now he's a very athletic guy. Him and his brother are just
Yeah.
amazing
Well, I'll
athleticism
tell you this,
and
they're
work.
not punks.
Oh hell no!
So
Jake
don't
Paul, let
think,
me tell
because
you something.
I hear
Jake
all these
Paul
guys,
got
when I see
balls.
him, I'll say up to him, I said, you better think twice about that. They're not sissies.
Bro, Jake Paul got heart and he's got balls.
Yeah, I
That kid
agree.
will fight anyone, and I think you guys are gonna see that coming up next year. I think he's looking for some big challenges. But back to your point, okay? I brought up a name earlier, like Michael Clark, for example, and we could go down, we could pick up any name you want of somebody who turned pro with very limited amateur experience. And right now, if his name was Jake Smith from Littletown, Tennessee, and was fighting the same caliber of opposition, no one would give a shit. No one would have anything to say. But the fact that this kid brings controversy, he brings excitement, and he's
Fans,
making
followers,
millions of dollars,
brings money.
brings
Jake Paul
money to the
already has
game.
changed the sport.
Listen, Emmanuel Stewart, I'll say this and I'll weave this together. I posted a picture earlier of Emmanuel and Hulk Hogan, and somebody commented on this,
I
and
saw
it's
that.
true. Emmanuel Stewart said that he would train Hulk Hogan because there was always these fantasy matches. Oh, if Hulk Hogan fought Mike Tyson, Emmanuel said, "Oh, I'd train Hulk Hogan." Emmanuel trained Bob Probert, Billy Ray Cyrus, Eminem, Wesley Snipes, Ving Rhames. Emmanuel loved this shit. So when people say, "Oh, how's KRONK supporter KRONK?" I'll stop before I really curse. But number one, we're always going to
Hey,
support our
you got the
KRONK
green
family.
light.
So we're always going to support, when Third and Jay Leon and anybody that is cut from the KRONK cloth. But I've had an opportunity, I've been fortunate enough to see him in the gym. And let me tell you something. Third, number one, doesn't take any shit. Third will push you to break you and train you again, old school. You're going to do footwork drills today. You're going to work on your balance today. Again, he's an Emmanuel Stewart teacher. Okay. He's not just a trainer, he teaches. And let me tell you, Jake, from what I've seen, the little bit I have seen, he is the hardest worker in the gym. And I put his work ethic up there with anyone. And I've been around the greats. I put his work ethic up there with all of them. And I swear to God, if you're fans, if you guys hate me for saying this, it's the facts. And again, he's fought, guess what? When he fought, like, say, Mike Perry or the couple of guys that he knocked out, those boxers, the guys that actually had pro records in boxing, okay, after the Nate Diaz fight, okay, these are the same guys that you would be fighting if you were 7-1 or 6-1 as a
I agree.
professional.
It's called
Again,
matchmaking.
there you go. And you know what? He destroyed those guys. He annihilated them. So he's beating those guys. So again, he's taking on every challenge, I think, especially for his developmental stages of his career. And at the same time, I think it's very important that we do acknowledge what he's doing for the sport. He's allowing people on the undercard, like Amanda Serrano. Now she's able to go and sign a whole bunch of fighters under her own banner that now they're getting paid career high paydays. He's bringing in new sponsors. He's bringing in a whole new generation of fans that are tuning in to watch boxing. And you know what? I don't know how much of that crosses over because, again, everyone wants to nitpick everything he does. But you know what? I say this. If 99.9%, dare I say 100% of the people that are criticizing what he's doing, if their phone rang and he offered them a position in camp or to get on his undercard or sign to his promotional team,
Canelo said it best.
Where do I sign?
Yep, Canelo said it best. You want the payday. You want the payday.
That's right.
And I'll tell you this, just like we talked about on top of the show, boxing has a small window, and he's capitalizing, being smart about business, entertainment, all in one. And fighters are upset because they've done that their whole career. He has a small window, and he's capitalizing on it, and he's taking it serious at all ends. He's even a promoter because he promotes his fights. Love him or hate him, people want to see him get beat. People want to see him win. And the opportunity that he's doing for the real fighters, when I say real, the ones that have come up that are champions, he's opening the door for them. He considers himself a real fighter, and I think the public needs to decide and make a decision and consider him a real fighter as well, because he's doing everything that he needs to be done. If he just barely started fighting, like we talked about matchmaking, we would bring him up because that's what you do. You don't just throw him to the wolves.
Look, on top of how ridiculous does that even sound for two fight guys like us to say that, throw them to the wolves. You protect your fighter without, getting them in those fights. It has to be at the right time. Like you said, It's matchmaking. So, I think to a lot of the critics, no, you have to stop saying, oh, he's not a fighter. He is a fighter. He's climbing up those steps. He's facing challenges. He's fighting real live guys, okay, that, again, same career trajectory, same career path. And I'll say this, he's putting in the work. When you hire a guy like Third Chambers and Jay Leon Love, and you got Coach Larry Wade as your strength and conditioning coach, let me tell you something. That kid is working his fucking ass off in the gym. And you know what? Yes, at times it's easy for people to point out the mistakes he made. He just started boxing. Literally.
You want to freeze right now because I want to hear this. Now, we got you. You're still there.
Yeah, no, I just said it, but he just started boxing. Look, I'm all
Well,
for it.
well, hey, he's doing everything that needs to be done. There's not one stone that he's not turning over or one opportunity that he's not taking advantage of, being smart. And at the end of the day, he's not doing this to embarrass himself. He truly believes. And that's the mindset you need as a fighter. And he's not out there doing things on YouTube and as much as he used to. He's focusing on the craft and the sport. And one thing I will say about him, which a lot of fighters don't do, once again, let's talk about that small window. He's very active.
Yes, he is, and I think it's safe to say that you'll see him coming right back after November, and there won't be too long of a layoff. I think he'll be right back in there, So he's again, I from day one, I caught, of course, some blowback from some guys, just I just call it the hater syndrome. But I remember when Third called me and he said, "John, I think I'm going to get this job, training Jake. I think I'm going to take it," because I believe he was approached before, and he kind of just watched from a distance with
Yeah.
what, Jay Leon and he had another couple trainers at the time. And I knew about it, and obviously I didn't say anything, but I had a bunch of shirts made up, some gym bags and stuff. And I remember before Third went to the airport, he stopped by and picked them all up. And for me, it's just great because a lot of people would say, "Oh, Emmanuel Stewart, he'd turn it over in his grave." There was some comments like that I'd read on social media. And my response is, well, then you probably didn't know Emmanuel Stewart too well. Because, like I said, I listed just a handful of the celebrities. Emmanuel wanted Eminem to have a fight, Billy Ray Cyrus to have a fight when he was the mega country music star at the time,
Yeah.
because he was fought in the Tough Man. We could go on and on. Okay. So I think Emmanuel Stewart not only would have been there personally if he could. Emmanuel loved the celebrity spotlight. He loved the bright lights and the action. He loved the controversy. He loved the challenges. But I think, Emmanuel, may he rest in peace, knowing how much he loved Third and Third's uncle Daryl, Babe Bro, Third's dad, and the entire Chambers family who was there from the earliest stages when Emmanuel started. Third's grandparents would pack the brown paper bag lunches for Tommy and Jimmy Paul when they were little kids going to tournaments. So I think for where Third is, that's as real as KRONK gets. And I think Emmanuel would be smiling down right now, seeing Third in that position after paying his dues for 30 some years in this game, getting his paper as well.
Brother, he's watching. Well, Emmanuel's watching the podcast right now, and that's real talk. I mean, hey, listen. Showtime signed Jake Paul. Top Rank Boxing signed Jake Paul. The Furies signed Jake Paul. So the train is there. You can get on or get off or watch it go by. It doesn't matter. He brings numbers. He fills the seats. He brings opportunity, and he brings excitement. So if you want to pay and buy a ticket just to see him get beat, go ahead. They did it to Mayweather. They did it to every fight. When there's two fighters there, some fans are for one, some fans are for another. That's the business. That's the sweet science.
Mm-hmm.
Jake Paul is very, very smart, and he's smiling all the way, but he's taking his physical body very seriously.
He is. And again, I think that, again, to repeat a point I made earlier, I just love what he's doing for the people around him. Again, I'm not part of that inner circle by any means, but from what I've heard by those who are, and from what little I've seen, he takes really good care of his people. No one's waiting on a paycheck to be cashed. People are getting taken care of. They're enabled to see so many different experiences and things that life has to offer being with him. And he's giving fighters opportunities. There's right now, we talked about how Turki Al-Sheikh is doing so many things at the big time level of boxing. And right now, like club level boxing or club show boxing, it might be to a point where we're struggling more than we have in recent years. But you have some really solid promotional outfits like, Tom's 360 Promotions out there. You've got Salida Promotions and Lou DiBella, guys that are still grinding it out, that are building prospects. And you have to mention MVP. You have to put them in that conversation, because what he's doing, though, he's keeping it in-house. The trickle-down effect from what he's driving at the top is coming in, and he's now signing and building up all these young fighters, giving them opportunities. And how about this? Let's not forget what he's doing with all these amateur gyms, his Boxing Bullies program that he works with Puerto Rico and the WBO, where he's putting his money into revitalizing and rebuilding these gyms to get kids off the street and get them in the boxing gym. He doesn't make money off that. He's doing out of that for the love of the game.
See, those are the stories that don't get told, but they got told today only on the Fighter's Voice. And when you started mentioning upcoming promoters and promoters, I got to let you know about this promotional company. You can look them up yourself, and I'm sure you've heard of them and you will hear of them. Marvin Nation Promotions, the only promotion that matters. Marvin Rodriguez does a great job with his fighters. Everybody gets paid, everybody gets taken care of, but everybody puts forth to it because there's work. You got to remember, I went there to go cover a fight. I went there to do some commentating with Bethel Duran. I was given an opportunity. And I said, do you need anything? And he said, Richard, we're short. I had just got off the flight in Texas. An hour and a half later, I'm learning how to put a ring together, how to tighten everything up, how to put the mats on there, the ring apron, you name it, the lights, the cranes. I got maybe 3 hours sleep before I had to be back over there. And I'm glad I did. I could have went to bed and just been one of those guys. And I don't want to say that he called me on my bluff. No, because I really meant it. Do you need anything? And I'm out there learning. So it takes a lot to make a promotion go forward. It takes a lot behind the scenes, fighters that don't make weight. And now you got to try to justify another fighter that doesn't make weight, a fighter that wants to pull out. You name it. He handles it very calm and collective. I will say this. There was this one event. It was a salad. He turned that event into a steak. And I'm watching him. I'm going, he's keeping his composure. Is he going to cancel this? Is he? And when they're testing the ring, they're looking for an excuse to cancel the powers that be, so to speak. Because I don't want to say too much. He made that program work. I mean, that was a great event that he put on. And shout out to Marvin Nation, Marvin Rodriguez. And I'll send you some of his intel, man. He does a great job.
Yeah, now that you mentioned it, I do know the name, and it's great to hear that story. And even though I don't know the gentleman, shout out to him as well, because those are the people that really drive this sport, that are grinding it out. And again, when you talk about if Jake Paul's name was, Jonathan Smith, whatever, from Littletown, Texas, out there, he's the guy on that undercard that's getting that chance to come up and build his career. So, I know what it's like to be at the club show level, grinding it out. Like you said, one guy's up there helping put the ring together. The other guy's setting up the chairs at ringside. It really, it's a grind that often burns a lot of people out, and they don't get the opportunity to last that long to see the potential payday.
Yeah.
And that's, to kind of bring it full circle for tonight. I think that's what, again, another beautiful quality about Emanuel Steward was that he would go out of his way and treat the club show promoter or the club show fighter like $1 million and make them feel special, and take the time to, he had his little Palm Pilot back in the day, and he would put like people's names, their birth dates, their kids' birth dates. And I remember when I was with him at his house, he had this one red leather chair was his favorite chair. And he would pull that out, and he would randomly, when he had free time, which wasn't a lot, but he would call people. He would just call random. Hey, how are you? Just checking to see how you're doing. How's your kids doing? Hey, I seen it's your birthday. Happy birthday. Oh, I missed your birthday the other day. I was tied up. I just wanted to call you. And these are people you're like, who's that? Like, he's not calling Don King and Bob Arum and negotiating big deals. He's calling, Johnny Thomas from Long Beach, California, and Tommy Jones from New Jersey, like just random people that he's met through the years. And that's I think one of the reasons why his legacy lives on. And I'm really excited. Thank you for having me on the show tonight. Absolutely. And looking forward to coming back with Hilmer and some of the team, and then lining you up with some of the KRONK fighters and contributing to what you do. I appreciate what you guys are doing out in the podcast world as well.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Well, let everybody know, the fans, the followers, and supporters, how can they be in contact with you, and how can they get some KRONK gym? Is there a website? Is there anything? Tell us.
Absolutely. Thank you for asking. KRONK.com, KRONK.com. There's a link to our store. If you see anything from the KRONK UK website, it's kind of a long story, but that is not us. They have no part of this. So if you see that KRONK Detroit stuff, that's not us. I'll leave it at that for now. But hit the store link on our website. Our socials are Real KRONK Gym. So that's Real KRONK Gym on all the social media platforms. And Roots of Fight is a partner of ours, as well as Title. So you've got a couple of different options there. And I appreciate the support. Thank you guys very much. We donate a portion of our proceeds every year to a beautiful youth program called Escott Youth Development that Jeff Stiers, former professional fighter, runs out in Westland, Michigan. So we're always giving back to the kids. And make sure you send a message with your updated info, because I got to have my guy send you some new swag. I see you got the one from last year. We got to update that.
Absolutely. After the show, when we step off, we'll definitely chat a little bit. And ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. If you have not subscribed, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, www.youtube.com/thefightersvoice. Remember, every fighter has a voice, and so do you. I want to thank our guest, Mr. John LEPAK, as always. You know, it's a pleasure talking to you, finally having you on the show. We've been texting back and forth. Can't wait to have you again. And as always, it's a wrap. Thumbs up for Richie.
Okay, fight fans, it's not goodbye, but until next week. Remember, it's always voiceography at its finest. So on behalf of Richard Ortiz, the special guests, saying hasta luego, babies. And always, thanks for listening.